In Print Radio. In Print is a professional writers organization located in Rockford, Illinois. We're dedicated to providing resources and education off the page and on the air. Hello, I'm Bob Francis. Today, In Print member Sandy Colbert sits down with author Mare Swallow.
Mare Swallow is a public speaker, training consultant, essayist, and founder of the Chicago Writers Conference. Welcome to In Print Radio, Mare.
Thanks, Sandy.
Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're obviously pretty entrenched in Chicago, I'm thinking.
Yes.
Okay.
Born and raised in Chicago, and I love reading, I love books, I love writing, and I always wanted to write for a living, so I did that for a while. And actually, I pursued journalism and then discovered journalism wasn't for me, but I've kept up the writing for fun, and I started the Chicago Writers Conference 3 years ago. We turned 3 in December.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. All right. Tell us about the Chicago Writers Conference.
So we have an annual conference every year, usually in the fall, and it spans 3 days. The Friday is always kind of an easy day because we just have a party on Friday night. Okay. And we have 2 days of educational sessions, and it's a place where writers can come to meet agents and editors and publishers. And we're really about helping people grow their writing careers. So it answers the question, what do you do when you're done with that manuscript? Should you blog about it? Should you be on social media? What is social media? How do I get a Twitter account? Should I bother tweeting? Do I need a publisher? Do I need an agent? Do I want to self-publish? So we answer all that, and we also have professionals from each of those areas to tell you about, how do you approach an agent if you need an agent? Can you go directly to a publisher? This year we added quite a few self-publishing components, so if people want to self-publish, they can learn about that too at the conference.
Well, there's so much going on now. Writing isn't what it was 15, 20 years ago, where you practically had to have an agent, mm-hmm. and you had to go through a traditional publisher and go through all of that and the rejections and everything. So now people can just go into self-publishing. Mm-hmm. What's your viewpoint when it comes to self-publishing?
Good question. I'm for it, but with a cautionary finger raised. You're right. Writing isn't what it used to be. Pretty much anyone with any crap, I'm just going to be honest, can go out there and publish it. That said, there's a lot of really great stuff that's self-published that just didn't find its way through the traditional channels. One of our speakers this year is Clayton Smith, and he's going to talk about the journey to self-publishing because he did a very interesting experiment. He self-published short stories first, and then he self-published a novel, which is wonderful. Okay, it's really good work, and he did his homework. So that, I think Clayton is an example of, hey, this is the right way to do it. But you can say anytime there's a lot of anything, there's going to be junk. Right. There's also a lot of people who think their cat is the greatest thing, or think that the fact that they grew up 2 blocks from wherever the Sox play. I know nothing about sports. They think that's story worthy, and I'm sorry, but it's not. I've read self-published books that were really, really bad, and I've read self-published books that were just phenomenal. Sometimes I think self-publishing is a good way to go if your purpose is not to, gain readers and be on the New York Times bestseller list. I have a business book that I will be self-publishing probably within the next year, and because I had talked to a bunch of industry insiders who all said, this is like a tips and tricks book for business, so I think you should self-publish. So I will be going that route. I like it. I think it's a good way I think it's something to explore, but again, I raise that cautionary finger. Just because you think your stories are great doesn't mean the rest of the world is going to think so. I'm sorry.
That's out there now. What I'm starting to see more of is that people who write blogs put it into a book form.
Yes.
Because they think their blogs were so great that this should now be a Pulitzer Prize winning novel.
Exactly.
And so there is a lot of that, mm-hmm. which never existed before. But I know what you're saying. I've seen books that are out there, and we've talked to authors who they don't realize the importance of an editor.
Yes.
And the grammar is awful, the sentence structure is terrible, mm-hmm. and you're sitting there going, why is this in a book form? Talk to me about editing.
Oh, editing is so important. And I say that, I think I'm happy, or I'm lucky that I get to see the importance of editing, because as I came up through the channels when I was in journalism, I was an editor for many years. I still love editing. When I'm at a restaurant, if a menu has a typo, I will point it out to the manager. I know, crazy.
No, that's okay.
But unfortunately, a lot of people don't see the benefit of an editor. And I think the fear is, oh, my work's wonderful, they're going to rip it apart. That's not what they're there to do. They're there to help you make it better. And there's this other thing that happens when I'm pointing to my forehead, to my brain, for those of you who can't see me. We hear the work in our brains and we know the work. So we think it's brilliant. But we also are so entrenched in it that we read a sentence and we might not realize there's a missing verb, or I forgot a semicolon. And editors are there really to make your work publishable and marketable and make it even better. They're not going to tear it up and make it something completely different, but maybe something could use tightening. Maybe you forgot to mention a character that you mentioned in chapter 1. An editor will catch that kind of stuff. And in fact, I'm glad you asked about that, because one of the topics we're having this year at the conference is how to make your work publishable. And it's all about the value of working with an editor, whether you're going the traditional route or the self-published route. People often don't realize that even when you are sending a manuscript, if you get a book deal and Random House or Random Penguin House, as they're now, or whatever they are, they merged, they still require that to be edited, and they may or may not do that for you. So you're still going to have to work with an editor. Right. Yeah, and it's a valuable thing. It's money well spent. I'll say that too. Yeah.
Well, I've just had my first experience with an editor, and you're absolutely right. The misspelled words, which I didn't realize I was misspelling.
Oh, yeah.
Even with Word, people are so reliant on their computers and word check and spelling check and all of that, but it misses a lot.
And you cannot rely on technology because it doesn't understand context.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was almost embarrassed when she, pointed out a few things. It's like, I can't believe I did that. And I never saw it. You read your work hundreds of times.
Right.
There was one short story that I wrote. I must have said, maybe 20 or 30 people read it. And I read it just recently with the editor, and there was a misspelled word that nobody caught.
Yep.
No, including me and all of my friends who read it. Nobody caught this misspelled word, but the editor caught it.
Yep, and that's the benefit of having some outside eyes who are there to do a job, not just read it lovingly.
Yes. You can get so easily entrenched in using the same word over and over again, and starting every sentence with so or but. That the editor fixes all of that.
Yes. My bugaboo is I start every sentence with well, because I think every time someone starts a thought, especially in dialogue, how are you today? Well, and it looks awful. Well.
And I was starting them all with but or so.
Yeah.
It was amazing, but you're absolutely right. I don't think it ever could be understated.
I don't think so either.
Don't get it out there. And like I said, I've seen books that are embarrassing. And these people are so proud of their book.
And I've been there too. And strangely enough, my mother, who's not in the literary world at all, she was in that same boat. And this was years ago, more than 10 years ago. A woman at her work said, my boyfriend published his book, and it was like 600 pages thick. I mean, I'm holding my fingers about 2 or 3 inches apart. And the woman gave it to my mom, said, read his book, tell me what you think. My mom read it, and it was exactly what you said. All these errors, spelling, grammatical, run-on sentences. And she told her friend at work, quite frankly, I don't think he should put this out there. And she said, how dare you say that? Right. This is his life. And I think that's the unfortunate nature with some people is they have this idea like, oh my gosh, you're offending my amazing artistic sensibilities. But what people forget is that's your reputation on the line. Yes. And when I hear people, I'll say this about, the conference, editors, anything. People get so defensive and PO'd, like, I'm not going to spend that much money. Your reputation is worth a few $100, Guy didn't take my mother's advice and just put this awful book with misspellings out there, and guess what? Nobody read past the first 10 pages or so because it was so difficult to read. And, people forget that, your education is worth it. Your reputation is worth it. If you're putting a product out there with your name on it, why not invest in it a little bit?
I mean, the other thing, too, books get reviewed. And
yes.
You don't want the reviewer saying that the sentence structure is terrible and the spelling is awful. They may point out different things about your story that they don't like, but you can't. I mean, I would be so humiliated.
Yes. And there are blogs that only review self-published books, and they will, I can't remember which one, there was this huge, it blew up on the internet where a guy who had a blog where he reviewed self-published books. If anything was sent to him, there was a woman who self-publish something. I won't say where through, because again, it's not the printer's fault or the publishing house's fault, whatever. And the sentence structure was so bad and the words and the spelling were so bad that he copied and pasted entire chunks. And then the woman who had sent him the book, the author, basically got into it with him in the comments. But then what was happening was the blog readers got into it on the comments as well, but they were defending the blogger and saying, yeah, your prose was horrible, your spelling was horrible, your sentences were awful. So you don't want to do that. Why? If you want to be known for your writing and your work, invest a few hundred, even it might, depending on the work, might even be up to $1,000, but isn't that better than being trashed? Exactly. And especially today when things do go viral and you can be spread all over the world in a matter of minutes, why not invest in yourself and your writing? I mean, your product.
Yes. It's enough to be a good writer and to have people recognize that. It's so important. But to have somebody say you can't even get a sentence right is just unbearable. I couldn't bear it.
Well, especially if you're advertising yourself as a writer, And I think that's the problem with anything artistic that's accessible. Anyone with a camera can call themselves a wedding photographer. Anyone with an iPod can call themselves a DJ. Right. And everyone writes because we have to do it. It's a necessary for life. So people will quickly bang out stories about their cats and call it a book.
It's true. It's true. Mm-hmm. The other thing that people don't realize how important it could be is writers' groups. Tell us your opinion of writers' groups.
I think they are useful. But here's the thing. It's like joining any other club or it's like interviewing for a job. You have to be choosy. You have to find a group that you work with and that you fit with. And by fit, I don't mean we all like each other or we all write romance or we all write sci-fi. You need to go into a writer's group with goals. And you also need to know what you want to get out of it. For me personally, when people do ask me like, well, what should I look for in a writing group? I tell them there better be some structure and there better be some consequences. I hate to say it, but I've been in writing groups where, most of the people would show up and say, well, I didn't do my 5 pages this week or whatever it is, or I didn't bring my chapter. Let's talk about what happened on Sex in the City. And stuff like that devolves and it's no good for anyone. You want a group where they will be honest and where it's not just a love fest, where they're not just telling you, oh yeah, your work's great and I really love that. You need to get some honest feedback like, I like this, but I don't understand why he's driving to Michigan for no reason or whatever. You need to get honest feedback. So for writers groups, and I tell people who have groups and people who want to join groups, there needs to be an interview process. There needs to be questions, there needs to be some goals. Don't just say, yeah, 6 of you write books, let's all have a group. Put some structure around it. How many times a year are you going to meet? If somebody skips 3 times, can they still be in there or no? If they don't bring their 10 pages next week, can they stay? Yes or no? There needs to be some structure and there needs to be rules and consequences, because when you get the one jerk who never brings their 5 pages and misses every other meeting, that's a drag on everyone else. And that person really shouldn't be part of that group. Conversely, if you're the writer who's doing all the work and people in your group are just there to goof off, that's not the group for you. Right. So I think they are important. I actually just spoke at the Writer's Digest conference in New York, and I heard this time and time again from agents, from editors with very large and respectable houses. Get in a writing group, share your work, get feedback on it. So I think those are the things people need to look for, is getting honest feedback, but also where there's some work and some rules and some real consequences, because you don't want to be with a bunch of people who are just there to goof around and drink wine once a month.
Mm-hmm. Right. Tell us about the Writer's Digest conference.
Oh, the Writer's Digest conference or the Chicago Writers
Both.
Conference? Okay,
First,
good.
I'm glad to hear about the Writer's Digest because I do get it.
I almost don't want to say anything for fear people will go there and not to Chicago Writers Conference, because I will tell you this, there were a shocking number of people from the Midwest, from Glen Ellen, from Chicago, and from Rockford there. And whenever I asked one, I was just like, wait a minute. I mean, I'll be honest, Chicago Writers Conference is my baby, and I treat it like my baby. I treat it like the most helicopter parent you can imagine. I should, but at the same time, whenever I met someone who was from very close to here, I would say, why are you here? Why aren't you coming to the Chicago Writers Conference? And I'm happy to say quite a few of them looked us up and now they are coming to the Chicago Writers Conference. So Writer's Digest, they've been around for more than 30 years. And they have a conference in New York every year. The time varies. It really has to do with, when they can get the space and when they can get their speakers. And they also host a conference just about novel writing, which is going on in Los Angeles right now as we speak. Yeah. And at both, I haven't been to the LA one, so I can't speak to that one too much, but Writer's Digest is a publication. It's been around a long time. And they are in New York, so they have everything you can imagine. There are people from the New York Times there, agents, editors, publishers. They had me as a speaker because I can really speak to what you should and shouldn't do as a writer. I think, I'm going to be frank, I think a lot of writers don't realize that, you can really put a nail in your coffin in your career before it starts if you don't follow some good advice, if you lack the professionalism. And that's what I was there to talk about. And it was great. We had a great crowd, and I heard really great feedback. People were saying to me, wow, I used your tips like the minute I walked out of the room. So that was great. So I spoke about networking and, the professionalism and ways you can go about making connections, or ways you can go about really ruining those connections. So which we don't want to do. So yeah, so Writer's Digest, similar to us, they go for about 3 days. They have an add-on day called Writer's Digest Pro, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Sounds like
yeah.
Gosh, especially being in New York and surrounded by all of that. So, but now
Yeah.
Chicago is going to have the third one.
This is our third one. Yep.
Okay, great. So tell me more details about it.
Sure. So, similar to Writer's Digest, it takes place over a weekend. We host events throughout the year as well. We have workshops throughout the year that are just one night only workshops, and we also offer free events for the community throughout the year. Yeah. So, but our big event is the Chicago Writers Conference. So Friday night there's a party, and then Saturday is an all-day sessions, and we run sessions concurrently. So you can go to a session on using Twitter, or you can go to the session on working with a publisher and editor. Again, we're going to have a whole track that is just self-publishing courses. There's, and it's just a great time for people to get together. Last year, 2 writing groups came out of it. I was so glad to hear that people were meeting each other and forming their own writing groups. And then Saturday night, we have a reading. Samantha Hoffman, who I'm not sure if she'll be here today, but she's a member of Chicago Writers Association. Right. She hosts the reading, and what happens is people who are attending the conference, if they're interested in reading, can submit their work for consideration, 5 to 7 minutes, and then it's curated. So 7 or 8 people are chosen to read, and then we have a reading at a bar, and it's a fun cocktail party. Last year it was just great. She likes to pick pieces that are engaging and entertaining, whether they're humorous or dramatic. We heard pieces last year from someone writing from a very personal standpoint about having a husband in the Iraq War. But then there was also a transgendered hairdresser reading a murder mystery. It was, or this is from the perspective of a transgendered hairdresser. And there was also Randy Richardson, who's also in CWA, told a quote-unquote fictional story about procrastinating as a writer, and it was just hilarious. So we get a wide range, and it's just a really fun night. And then Sunday we have more educational sessions, and we wrap up with a keynote speaker.
Oh, it sounds really exciting.
It is. It's a lot of fun. And like I said, what makes me happy, our first year, Patricia Skalka got a 3-book deal as a result of something that happened at the conference. Yes. Wow. And then last year, 2 other people published their books. One was self-published, one got a traditional publishing contract. 2 writing groups formed after the reading series last year. So that was that stuff makes me happy and just makes me I get tears in my eyes thinking about it. And
because you created it.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Well, it just makes me happy because I did this because I love watching people. I love writing. I love the literary community, and I love watching people achieve their dreams or reach their goals. So that makes me happy. And I even say, but better than a phone call from George Clooney. So yeah. Who wouldn't want that? Right?
Yeah, he's getting married.
Yeah, he's off the table now.
Yeah, he's off the table.
Damn it.
I know. Gosh, it sounds really exciting. What else about you? We've talked about the Chicago Writers Conference. We just touched on you. How long have you been a public speaker?
I started doing this in the mid-'90s. I was a software trainer, and then I grew into soft skills training, and that's probably my favorite thing to do is just give speeches to rooms of people. I like I said, I like helping people reach their dreams or reach their goals.
Is it primarily about writing that you speak about?
No, it's all very corporate-y stuff. It's presentation skills, how to be a better speaker, how to be a better presenter or motivator or meeting facilitator. Yeah. I've been traveling since the mid to late 90s, and I'm a little tired.
Yeah, I don't blame you. That takes a lot out of you.
It does, and it used to be fun to get to the hotel room and get my glass of wine and watch HBO or whatever. And now it's just when I went to Writer's Digest, that was a blast, and I couldn't wait to be there. But when I have to travel and get up and talk for 8 hours the next day, I'm done. So I'm not traveling as much as I used to. No.
And you're also a training consultant?
Mm-hmm. It's same thing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Tell us about some of the things you've published.
It's going to be, like I said, I will be self-publishing book. I wrote a memoir, and then I wrote a business book on public speaking. It was all geared for 21st century, how do you deal with the people who are on Twitter all the time? And 7 agents looked at one book, 10 agents looked at the next one. Nobody wanted it. So I put a book out on Amazon for Kindle. Yeah, so you can find my book on Amazon. It's called 21 Ways to Engage Your Audience. There's a better version of it coming out in the future, I promise. Because exactly what you said about editing and typos, I looked at it. I looked at the book, I don't know, about a year ago. I pulled it up from Amazon as you would buy it on Amazon, and I found a mistake. So I'm happy to say that book has not reached a wide audience yet. And then the other book I'm working on, the working title is 187 Tips for Humanities Majors. It's telling, kids who major in the humanities in college, here's what you need to do to get a job after college. Right. So that's also going to be self-published. But other than that, I write personal essays and I tell stories in bars. I'm very active in the live lit community in Chicago. How can our listeners contact you? Absolutely. Best way is through the website at chicagowritersconference.org. And we are also on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Shy Writers Conf, and our Twitter handle is the same. It's at CHI Writers CONF. Okay. And we look at I see all that stuff. So please reach out anytime. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sandy. This has been fun. Yes, it has. Yeah. And hopefully next year I can make it to the Chicago Writers Conference. We'd love to have you. We'd love to see you there. I will be there. Great. Thanks, Sandy. Sure. Thank you so much for all you do for the writing community, too. Hey, thanks for having me. You're welcome. Thank you.